going to start at 2 Corinthians 4:16. Oh, I never synced my tablet. But Avery, you're good. You're good to go. You can stick with me, okay, bud? 2 Corinthians 4:16 says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, while we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal." So that's the point of this string that is now being passed around. Let's bring it back up here, and then when he gets back to Seattle, he's going to bring it over into the middle. We said this is our life period, right? This is the 100 years that we live here on earth. Now, the rest of the yellow string now, we're talking about eternity. This is what's going to happen. This is what's coming, the life that we're going to spend with God. And what Paul says is, I'm not spending my time, I'm not going to consume my time worried about this part of my string. I'm going to spend my time looking and focusing on the yellow part of the string. And it's kind of hard because we live in the here and now. We live in the physical. We live in this earth. It's kind of hard to think about eternity. 100 years seems like, how does this going to work best? I'm not sure. We're figuring it out? Okay. There we go. We got it. Just stop and think about this for a second. This segment is where we're living right now. Some of us, my parents, are closer to this end of the string. There's some, 7-year-olds in here who are they're still stuck in the mic stand. And then a lot of us are here in the middle somewhere. And this often consumes our thoughts. This consumes our day-to-day life. But look at how far this yellow string goes. I mean, down and back and down and back and down and back. And this yellow string is eventually going to run out, which is therefore a poor illustration of eternity, right? Because the whole concept of eternity is the yellow string doesn't go for 99 meters and then stop. It goes and goes and goes. So Paul is saying, when I think about this, when I look at this string and think about, okay, I've got this much time here on earth, and then I've got eternity, I don't spend my time focused on this part of it. Because there's a whole lot more out there than there is right here. So Paul says specifically, we do not lose heart. And you look back a couple of verses. In verse 8 of chapter 4, it says, "We are hard pressed on every side, yet not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. We are persecuted, but not forsaken. We are struck down, but not destroyed." So what he's saying is, I'm not living a comfortable and easy life. This segment of my life is not easy. It's not pain-free. It's not trouble-free. But that doesn't bother me. And then I love the way he plays with these words. He says, our light affliction, in verse 17, which is but for a moment, it's a short part of the string, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. We do not look at the things which are seen. Usually, if there's things that are seen and things that are unseen, which do you look at? It's obvious. You look at the things you can see because you're seeing. It says we don't see the things that you can see. We see the things that you can't see. We're looking at eternity. We're focusing on the yellow part of the string. What does that look like practically? So here's our first handout, Avery. What does it look like practically to look at the eternal rather than the temporary things? What does a life look like? And we've been talking about home, and we've been talking about that heaven is our true home. Heaven is our real home. Trying to remind ourselves that we are not home, that even though we're at home in our bodies, they're just tents. Even though we're home in our families, they're just tents. Even we're at home in communities and in countries, they're temporary dwellings. And that our home as believers is in heaven. But then how do you live? If that's true, how do you live that out? So the next blank, if you could fill in, is Hebrews 11, 24 to 28. Hebrews 11 talks the whole chapter about people who lived by faith. And it defines faith right in verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, and it's the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith, I'm in verse 3 of Hebrews 11. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen, you hear the echoes of 2 Corinthians 4, seen and unseen. The things that are seen were not made of things which are visible. So Paul's saying this short segment, the seen, physical, temporary segment of life was made by the Word of God. So even this physical part of life was made by things that cannot be seen. It's made by the eternal, by the invisible things. Even in this part of life, the ultimate reality is the spiritual, eternal reality. He says when you grasp that, and when you live like that, that's called faith. You live by faith. You see things that other people cannot see. You live by realities that other people don't understand. So then he starts to talk about people who lived that way. People who lived focused on all this yellow string that's out in front of us, instead of this short black segment right here. I want to focus specifically on Moses, 11:24. It says, by faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. That's mind-boggling what he says about Moses. Moses was raised, if you remember your Sunday school and children's church, these are the things we're teaching our kids. Moses was raised as the son of Pharaoh. Had all of that opportunity, had all of that privilege in front of him. It says he chose, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Why would anybody in their right mind, if you've got, I could live my life as the son of Pharaoh's daughter, or I could live my life as part of a people of slavery, why would anyone choose to live in slavery? Why would anyone choose to identify with these people who are encaptured and people who live their lives for other people? Paul, the author of Hebrews, says it's because he looked to the reward. In other words, instead of saying, I'm going to make decisions based on this part of the string, I'm going to prioritize this section, and all my life I'm going to live based on what's good for right now, and all of the rest. Can you do me a favor? I think the string is almost handed out, right? Can we just start, can you hold up the yellow part for just a second? If it's by you, can you just hold it up? Just physically, eternity is hard to get our minds around. So just physically, look at this. This is your life, okay? This is the time you're going to spend on earth. And then that's eternity. That's not even the beginning of eternity. You see what I'm saying? It goes, and 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 it goes. It goes back here, and then it goes back again, and it comes back into the middle again. Thank you. You can put that down. So a lot of times, people living in this section look at people living by faith and say, you're crazy. You're ridiculous. The choices you're making, the priorities you have, the things you're doing with your time, the things you're doing with your resources, the things you're doing with your energy are ridiculous, stupid, crazy. And what people of faith say is, you're crazy if you live for this short section of life. It is ridiculous. It's insane to say, this is what my life is going to be about. This is what I'm going to prioritize over everything else. This is going to dictate my priorities, my values, my passions, my energy, my resources, this section of rope. And the rest, I'll figure it out when I get there. People of faith look to the reward. They look and they say, that's worth it. All of that is worth whatever I have to go through in this section. So Moses chose the reproach of Christ over the riches of Egypt because he looked to the reward. This concept of vision and of what you see and what you look at is so important. What do you go through life focused on? What do you go to bed at night thinking about? What is it that consumes your vision? What do you spend your web browsing time looking at and searching for? Do you remember the passage I read? Let's turn to Matthew 6, and then we're gonna spend the rest of our time there. I don't know about you guys. I'm burning up here. Ruben, can we hit the fans? And Dad, can you make sure the heat is turned off? You've got it? Okay. Matthew chapter 6. Jesus emphasizes the same thing, this idea of living by faith. What are you looking at? What fills your vision? Moses looked to the reward. We've already turned away from Hebrews 11, but I forgot there's another passage. It says that he didn't fear the king, he didn't fear the Pharaoh, because he saw him who is invisible. Isn't that awesome? Some of you have never looked at the invisible part of life. Some of you have never truly seen what's coming, what's ahead. The only thing your eyes ever see is the physical. And what faith is, we talk about faith so much, your faith and my faith and his faith. The Bible tells us faith is about opening your eyes to spiritual realities. Faith is seeing spiritual truths. Faith is living by the truths and the spiritual things that you see. Moses lived by faith. He saw what so many people can't see. Paul saw what so many people can't see. And he said, I live by what I can see. In 2 Corinthians, in chapter 5, so we read the last part of chapter 4. In 5:7, there's that famous verse. For we walk by what? We walk by faith and not by sight. We look at the yellow part of the string and not the short beginning part of the string. We look at the spiritual things and not just the physical things. We look at eternal things and not just temporary things. That's the essence of what it means to walk with God. That's what faith is about. So Christ emphasized the same thing in Matthew chapter 6 in verse 22. He says, the lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. Those are pretty big words. We're gonna start talking about money now. And I know we have visitors here, and I want you to know we don't talk about money every Sunday at High Point. And I'd love if you'd come back and see some of the other things we talk about. However, some churches, because of how much churches have abused money, just never talk about money and never talk about giving and never talk about what we're going to talk about. But Christ talks about them. And Christ doesn't apologize for it, and Christ doesn't say, hey, I'm going to say some things and I hope this doesn't offend you. He gets out both barrels of his shotgun and he goes at you. And so if we decide, well, Christ, that's offensive in our culture, I don't think we have that choice. I don't think we have that authority to say, I'm going to talk about these words of Jesus and I'm not going to talk about these words of Jesus. So look at what Jesus says. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Think about a concrete room with no windows and no doors, and you're inside, and you've got one lamp hanging from the ceiling. What Christ is saying is if that lamp works, you're good to go. You've got one light to light up the room, and if it's good, you're good. But if that one lamp that is supposed to light up the whole room is out, is dark, it doesn't work, then you are completely hopeless because there's no other way for light to come in. And he uses that analogy with the body and the eyes. With your body, your eyes are the light of your body. They show your body. Light comes in through your eyes. And he's not talking about physical. He's talking about what you look at, what you think about, what you focus on. It says if your eyes are focused on the temporary, if your eyes are focused on this, if your eyes are focused on how I can get more and how I can get ahead and how I can succeed here and now, how great is the darkness inside you. You've got no light. You've got no vision for what's coming. Now, if you're a good sermon listener, you should be asking yourself, how do you know he's talking about money, Duane? Because he didn't say anything about money. You're the one bringing up money. You should be thinking, how do we know he's talking about money? We know he's talking about money because we look at the verses right before, we look at the verses right after, and he's talking about money. Let's look at 6:19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Avery, I don't know where you're at, but could you put up, Jesus warns us that our vision will directly impact our finances. And warns, I don't know if that's the right word. He tells us, he makes it clear to us that what you look at is going to affect how you live, the choices you make. What you spend your time focusing on, which side of the string you're looking at, will dictate how you spend your money. And you can kind of go backwards. So if I say, who in this room is focused on the yellow part of the string? And we just raise our hands. And who in this room is focused on this beginning blackened part of the string? And we raise our hands. That's one way of doing it. We could flip that. And we could say, what does your money say you're focused on? What does your checkbook, and who uses checkbooks anymore? What does your online banking account tell us that you're focused on, that you spend your time looking at, that consumes your thoughts? What do your Amazon purchases tell us that you're focused on, that you're looking at? Because Jesus says that where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. So there's 3 questions here before we move on. What part of the string do you look at? If you just think about your life, think about your thoughts, your passions, your energy, what consumes you, what do you go to bed thinking about, what do you wake up thinking about? Is it on the first part of the string or the second part of the string? Do you live life thinking about eternity, focused on eternity? That's one of my prayers, one of my goals as a pastor with this whole idea of home is to push us, to push us, to push us to think about where our home is. So that we begin to think about all this yellow string that's in front of us. I've said before, there are billions of dollars are spent in the advertising world to get you to think right here, and nothing but right here. Maybe billions is too much. I don't know. No. They make their money by getting you to focus on here and now and your needs and getting your wants to become needs. So I'm one little voice with Jesus saying, would you think about eternity? Would you think about what's coming? Because proportionately, this is nothing. This is a tiny fragment of your reality. So what part of the string do you look at? And then dig a little deeper. Where do you look for security? When you're concerned and when you want to think about how do I know things are going to be okay, what makes you sure that things are going to be okay? Is it your job, your employer, or is it your God? To me, that is fundamental about where our faith is, what we're seeing as reality. How do you know the bills are going to get paid? How do you know you're going to have enough next month and next year and the year after that? Is it your retirement, the pension plan the Army has after 20 years, that big carrot? Or is it God's grace? Is it God's goodness that you're really banking on, that you're really trusting in? And then this last question, how do you view your possessions? The things that you own, the things that are yours. Let's just start with the paycheck you get, and then the things you buy with that paycheck, the homes that maybe you and the bank are owning together, the cars and the clothes and the computers and cell phones, and on the list goes. How do you view those? Do you view yourself as the owner with absolute authority over them? I get to say what I do with my stuff. Or do you view yourself as the steward, the manager, with accountability to God for them? Those are fundamentally different views on our possessions and our things. In this segment of life, we view ourselves as, this is mine, I earned it, I have authority over it. In the rest of the segment, we say, everything is God's. What I have is God's, what they have is God's, what he has is God's. So I am a steward for my children, over my possessions, over the money I get, over the things I have. I have an accountability. Instead of authority, I have accountability for what I do with it, how I use it. Why is your vision so important? Christ tells us in 21, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So can you fill out this next segment? Your eyes reveal your treasure, and your treasure reveals your heart. Your eyes reveal your treasure, and your treasure reveals your heart. This week, as I've been preparing and studying for this sermon, it has been I was going to say eye-opening experience, but that's a little bit of a cliche. It's been a sobering study to really look at myself and say, what am I looking at? What am I focusing on? What gets me excited? I love soccer. So I have an old man soccer team that I've told you about that I play on. I've got a middle school soccer team that I help coach. Then I've got my favorite German team, Werder Bremen, and I've got my favorite English team, Chelsea. And my wife will tell you, between those four, soccer becomes a part of almost every day of our lives. There's something with soccer going on. So I have to check myself. How much energy do I put into that? How much time do I put into that? And soccer may not be your thing, but I bet you have a thing. I bet you have something that you love to think about, you love to go to, you love to spend time on. Eventually, the things we love, we spend time on, we end up spending money on. And that's not bad, but what's the proportions? How much is it consuming of us? Hobbies are fine, but they ought to be hobbies, not gods. God ought to be God, and hobbies ought to be hobbies. And I've had to inspect my life and my heart and say, how much am I really viewing eternity? How much do I think about eternity? How much do my passions reflect eternity? And how much are they consumed and wrapped up in temporary? The church history is spotted with people who you can look at their lives, men and women, and say they looked at eternity. They saw eternity. And their lives on earth reflected that. Their eyes revealed their treasure, and their treasures revealed their hearts. And we can look back at church history and be amazed at the sacrifices people have made and the lives that people have lived. But that's great for history, but what about us? What about here and what about now? What about you? What does your life reflect is important to you? What does your life reflect is most valuable? My dad, I can remember this still as a kid, used to talk about if there was a court case and someone would drag you up in front of a court and accuse you of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to declare you guilty? Could they find enough in your life to say without a doubt, without a reasonable doubt, you are a Christian? That's a sobering thought. If they get out your bank account and say, without a reasonable doubt, this person's a soccer fan. I can prove that without a doubt. So your eyes reveal your treasure reveals your heart. And Jesus, the next one, Jesus implores us not to waste our lives on temporary things, but to invest them in eternal things. Look at 19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. The eternal God, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So you've got this eternal God from eternity past to eternity future coming among us, living, moving backwards, right? So he lives in the yellow part of the string, and then he comes into our part of the string, and he says, man, don't waste your life living for this part. I'm telling you, there's more to come. There's more than bank accounts. There's more than money. There's more than 401ks and retirement plans. Don't waste your life on that. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Start investing in eternity where there is no corruption, where there are no stock market crashes, where you do not lose your investments. He implores us not to waste our lives on temporary things, but to invest them in eternal things. We're told in the Bible that when we go to heaven, actually in 2 Corinthians, right after the passage we talked about in chapter 4, you go into chapter 5, he says that every one of us must give an account. There's coming a time where we're going to stand before God, and Jesus says that we're going to have to give an account for the words we say, that we're going to have to explain the words we said. And I thank God when it's my time to give an account, I'm going to be, who was it just before Congress taking the Fifth Amendment? I'm going to be taking the Christ Amendment. That's going to have to be covered by Christ's blood, Christ's blood, Christ's blood, Christ's blood, Christ's blood. I believe Jesus also, I stopped that sentence, start a new one. Jesus told several parables about stewards. You remember those? God giving people resources, God giving people talents, God giving people money, leaving, coming back and saying, what did you do with it? Give an accounting to me for what you did with my things that I put under your control. Just imagine with me this part of the string right here, where it goes from black to yellow. And if Christ's right about us giving an account of our words, and Christ's right about us giving an account of our stewardship before him, and Paul's right about us standing before God and giving an account, and Christ starts to say, okay, what did you do with the money I gave you? How did you invest it? Where did you spend the money? There are going to be a lot of things that I'm going to be really embarrassed. And really, there's going to be some awkward silences as I try to explain how the 17 soccer jerseys I have are a good investment of Christ's money. And I thank God for his grace, right? But wouldn't it be nice in that accounting to have some things that we say, God, this is what I did with your money. This is how I invested what you gave me. Some things where we weren't embarrassed, some things where we weren't dodging and trying to explain, and well, there's this sketchy kind of connection to spiritual things. If you close your eye and hop on one foot, you can kind of see how this is eternal. You can kind of see how this impacts spiritual things. But wouldn't it be nice if there were some things where we would just say, God, I don't have to dodge, I don't have to make excuses. You gave me this money, and I invested it in eternity. And look where we are. It's March 8th, and we're going to make some faith promise commitments today. And I believe that faith promise is something that we can give to God, that there's no excuses that we have to make, there's no embarrassment that we have to have, there's no dodginess of, well, it kind of makes sense, and spiritually it's all right if. Ways that we can invest our money and say, God, you gave me money and I invested it in eternity. Ways that we show our treasure is in heaven. Now, about this time, you're probably saying, well, isn't it convenient that your sermon leads to me giving a faith promise commitment? And let me say this as sincerely as I can, and please take me as seriously as you can. I don't care if you give money to Faith Promise or you don't give money to Faith Promise. The same way that you should trust in God to take care of your needs, we as a church trust God to take care of our needs. And our missionaries trust God to take care of their needs. So our missionaries' security is in their God, not in our giving. And we as a church, our faith promise and our endeavors is we trust God to supply. I'm not here with a hat in my hand saying, please, please, please. As a pastor, I am here absolutely convinced that the way you use your money has eternal significance. So if you want to prove me wrong and you want to make sure that I'm not about just trying to get money out of you, go take your money and give it somewhere else. It's fine with me. If you can say, I'm not giving to High Point, I'm not giving to Faith Promise, but I am giving my money to eternal things, that's the issue. But I 100% believe that when Christ says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, that he meant do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. And he meant lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I think he meant that. I think everyone who follows Jesus Christ has an obligation to be laying up treasures in heaven. And I think if you're not laying up treasures in heaven, Christ says your heart is not in heaven. Because where your treasures are, there your heart will be also. And so as a pastor, I am imploring you to invest in eternity. And Jesus isn't even done yet. That's just one barrel of the shotgun he's fired so far. So then you read about the lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. If you spend your time looking at the yellow part of the string, your whole body will be full of faith. You'll be full of understanding what life is all about. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And then we Americans who like to have both and instead of either or. Well, why can't I have the physical and the eternal? Why can't I have the temporary and the eternal? Why can't I have the physical and the spiritual? Why can't I have faith and sight? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. But you cannot serve God and stuff. What he's saying is you have to choose. There has to be a choice in your life at some point where you choose, this is what I'm going to live for. And basically it comes down to, there has to be a choice. I'm going to live for now, or I'm going to live for eternity. I'm going to invest my life and my resources in this, or I'm going to invest my life and resources in eternity. You cannot do both. One of them will be God, and one of them will be servant. Man, now start to think about which is God and which is servant in your life. Which master are you serving? Jesus, not Pastor Duane. Jesus says you have to pick a God. You have to pick a master. You will pick a master. You will live for one part of the string or another part of the string. One of those will come first, and one of those will come second. One of those will call the shots, and one of those will follow. So just start to think in your life. And I've stepped on my own toes, so now it's time for me to step on your toes. Just start to think in your life which comes first and which comes second. Just start to think in your life which are taken care of first and which are given the leftovers. Which gets taken care of first and which gets the leftovers. Usually when it comes to giving in a church setting, what happens is we pay all of our bills, and then we pay all of our wants, and then we go to McDonald's a few times, which is, we don't even want to, but we still go there, and we know we're killing ourselves, and we still do that. And then when all that's done, then we look at what's left, and we say, man, I can't afford to give. I'm sorry. I would if I could. I really want to, but I can't afford to. And Jesus very simply says, you can't serve two masters. You'll serve one, and you'll push the other off. You'll take care of one, and you'll give the other the leftovers. That's the way you will live. You'll take care of one, and you'll give the other the leftovers. So if Jesus says that in our lives, and Jesus is talking about finances. In our finances, we will take care of one and we will give the other the leftovers. Which are you taking care of? And which are you giving leftovers to? Which gets the first fruits and which gets what's left? Let's pray together.